My name is Serena. I am 33 years old. I knew my husband married me for money 17 days after our wedding. I did not tell him I knew. I did not leave. I decided to stay and watch. I stayed for 5 years. This is what happened in those 5 years. His name is Julian. We met at a charity event when I was 27. My family was one of the sponsors. He was introduced to me by a mutual friend. He was handsome and smooth and very good at making a person feel like the most interesting woman in the room. I liked him. I want to be honest about that. He was charming and he was interesting. And when he looked at me, I felt seen. I know now that feeling seen was something he was skilled at manufacturing. But in the beginning, I did not know that. I was just a woman who liked someone. We dated for 8 months. He was attentive. He remembered small things I said. He was never late. He met my family and was gracious to everyone. My mother approved of him, which was not easy to earn. My father liked that he was direct. They said he seemed solid. He proposed with a ring that was too expensive for someone in his position at the time. I noticed that, but did not think too much about it. People make large gestures when they are in love, or when they want to appear to be. I had not yet learned to tell the difference. We married in April. It was a beautiful wedding, not large, about 80 people. I wore white, and he cried when I walked toward him, and I thought, this is real. He loves me. Whatever else is uncertain about life, this part is real. I was wrong, but I did not know it yet. 17 days after the wedding, I found a message. I was not looking. I was not suspicious. I was on his laptop because mine was charging and I needed to send an email. The browser was open. The message was visible on the screen. It was to a friend of his named Carlo. The message was about me, about the wedding, about the fact that it had gone well. He said it was easier than expected. He said I was more trusting than he had anticipated. He said with a wife like this, the next few years would be very comfortable. He used the word comfortable. I read it twice. I closed the laptop. I sat very still for several minutes. My hands were on my knees. The apartment was quiet. Everything around me looked exactly the same as it had looked 5 minutes before, but nothing was the same. I thought about what to do. My first instinct was to confront him, walk into the room, and ask him directly. But I stopped myself. Something said, wait. Something said, do not react yet. Think first. So I thought about what I actually knew. I knew one message. I knew the word comfortable. That was significant, but it was one data point. I decided I would watch. I would be patient. I would see if there was more. I would not let him know that anything had changed. The next morning, I made breakfast, and he sat across from me at the table, and I smiled at him the same way I had always smiled. He smiled back the same way. He did not know that I had read the message. He did not know that something inside me had shifted permanently overnight. I began to pay attention differently, not suspiciously, not dramatically, just carefully. I noticed things I had not noticed before. He was more interested in conversations about finances than most people would be. He asked about my family's business with the attention of someone doing research. He was generous when we had dinners with my parents. He was engaged with my father's stories about the company. He asked good questions. My father liked him more each time. That liking had a value that I was beginning to understand. I started keeping records, not for a dramatic reason, because I am a careful person and careful people document things. I started a private journal. I wrote down what he said and what he did and what it suggested about his understanding of our marriage and my family's position. Over the first year, I collected enough to understand the full shape of what he had done. He had identified me at the charity event with intention. He had researched my family before approaching me. He had planned the 8 months with specific outcomes in mind. I was not a person he had fallen in love with. I was an opportunity he had identified. That knowledge was painful in a specific way, not the loud pain of betrayal in the moment, the quieter pain of understanding that something you thought was real never was, grieving the love that was not love, the proposal that was a calculation, the tears at the wedding that I still did not fully understand. But I stayed. People will want to know why I stayed. The answer is not simple. Part of it was pride. I did not want to have been that wrong. Part of it was caution. I wanted to be fully prepared before I ended it. And part of it was something else. I wanted to understand him completely before I made any decision. In the second year, I consulted a lawyer in private. She was someone my family had used for decades, and I trusted her completely. I told her everything. She listened without expression until I finished. Then she asked careful questions. We began to build a structure that would protect me when the time came. My family assets were already protected. They had always been in structures that a spouse could not touch. My father had insisted on certain arrangements before the wedding. At the time, I had found that slightly unromantic. Now I found it deeply wise. My father had been more cautious than I was, but Julian had been working to influence other things. I had learned through the records I was keeping that he had been speaking with a contact of my father's, trying to build a relationship that might eventually include him in business discussions. He was patient about it. That was something I had not expected. His patience. In the third year, my father had a small health scare. Nothing serious ultimately, but Julian's response to it was revealing. He became very interested. He wanted to be involved in conversations about my father's business continuity. He positioned himself as helpful. He was helpful in some ways, but his interest was not only care. I began to feel something I had not expected. Not anger, something calmer, a kind of clarity. I could see him completely by then, not as the man I had thought I was marrying, not as the villain I had been afraid he might be, just as a person who had made a choice I found contemptible, a person I understood fully and no longer loved at all. In the fourth year, I started planning the ending, carefully, without emotion, the way you plan any complex, logistical situation. There were things I needed to have in order: documents, conversations, timing. My lawyer and I met monthly. We went through everything, step by step. Julian knew nothing. He continued in his way. He continued to be charming to my family, to position himself, to ask interested questions. He was good at the long game. I was better, because I had been playing it knowingly, and he had not known he was in it. At the end of the fourth year, we had dinner with my parents. My mother made her best meal. My father opened good wine. Julian was at his most charming. He made my father laugh twice. He touched my hand across the table. I smiled at him. I had become very good at smiling at him. Walking home, he said he thought things were going well. He said it in a comfortable way. That word again, comfortable. I said, yes, I think so too. I held his arm the way I always did. I said nothing more. Inside, I knew that there were 6 months left. In the 5th year, I made my final preparations. Everything was in order. My lawyer was ready. The documents were complete. I had spoken to a few people who would need to know. My father was the hardest conversation. He had liked Julian, trusted him. Learning the truth was difficult for him. He was angry in that quiet, sustained way that serious men are angry. On a Tuesday in October, in the 5th year, I sat down with Julian after dinner. He was comfortable, relaxed. He had poured wine. He had no idea. I said, "I need to tell you something." He said, "Of course." He leaned back in his chair. I told him I knew. I told him about the message I had found 17 days after our wedding. I told him about the records I had kept. I told him about my lawyer and the preparations. I told him that everything was already in order and that the process would begin the following morning. He went very still. He looked at me for a long time. I watched his face change. The charm left it. What remained was something flatter. He said, "How long have you known?" I said, 5 years. He said nothing. He tried. He tried several approaches over the next hour. Denial, explanation, an appeal to the good times, an appeal to the future. I listened to each one. I said nothing until he finished. Then I said, "I have thought about this for 5 years. There is nothing you can say that I have not already considered. I am very prepared." He left the next morning. It was efficient. My lawyer handled the process, and it was done within a few months. He contested nothing. He had nothing to contest with. Everything that mattered had been protected long before he arrived. My father called me after it was over. He said, "I did not know you had that in you." I said, "I did not know either until I needed it." He laughed. He said he was proud of me. That meant something. My father is not a man who says that easily. I am free now in a way that I was not even before the marriage, because now I know myself differently. I know what I can endure, and what I can build, and what I will not accept. Those are useful things to know about yourself. Julian taught me something he did not intend to teach me. He taught me that patience is not passive, that watching is not the same as accepting, that you can know the truth and choose your moment, that preparation is its own kind of power. I am grateful for none of what he did, but I am glad for what I became because of it. The message I found on Julian's laptop was not the only thing I found in those 5 years. It was the beginning of a file. I am a meticulous person. I have always been organized. I put those skills to use in a way I had not anticipated on the day I signed my name at our wedding. I kept a journal, a physical one, not on any shared device, not anywhere he could find it. I kept it in my office, which he rarely entered. It was a plain dark blue notebook, and it looked like every other professional notebook I kept. No one would have looked at it twice. The first entry was the day after I found the message. I wrote down everything I remembered, the exact words he had used, the name Carlo, the date, the time. Then I wrote, "I do not know yet what I am going to do, but I know I am going to pay attention." That was the beginning. Every week after that, I wrote down what I observed, not conclusions, observations, what he said, what he did, what changed between the version he presented to the world and the version I saw when we were alone. The differences were instructive. In public, he was warm with me in a specific way, a hand on my back, a turn of attention toward me in group conversations. He was good at the performance of a devoted husband. It was convincing. My friends liked him. My colleagues liked him. Everyone liked him. In private, he was different. Not cruel exactly. More like disengaged. He was physically present, but not fully there. His attention was always partly elsewhere. When I spoke, he listened enough to respond, but not enough to remember later. I tested this. I would say something specific in the evening and ask about it a week later. He never remembered. What he did remember was anything related to money, to my family's business, to positions of influence or access. Those details he retained with perfect accuracy. He could recall a conversation about my father's company from 8 months prior with complete fidelity, but he could not remember what book I was reading. I wrote all of this down, not with bitterness, with precision. I was building a record. I did not know exactly what I would do with it yet, but I was certain that clarity would eventually serve a purpose. That has always been my nature, my father's too. We are people who keep records. Carlo came to dinner twice in the first year. He was smooth in the same way Julian was smooth. He looked at me with a kind of appraisal that was subtle but real. I understood then that Julian had spoken to him about me in a specific way, not as a person, as a position. I was pleasant to Carlo both times. I asked interested questions. I laughed at the right moments. After the second dinner, Julian said I was excellent company. I said thank you. He had no idea that I had been watching Carlo the same way Carlo had been watching me. In the second year, Julian mentioned a contact of my father's, a man named Porter, who was involved in commercial real estate. Julian said he had run into him somewhere. He said he thought it might be worth having them to dinner. I said that sounded fine. I filed the name in my notebook. A month later, I mentioned to my father in passing that Julian had mentioned Porter. I said Julian seemed interested in him. My father paused. Then he said, "Is that right?" He said it the way he says things. When he is thinking something, he is not ready to say yet. I said nothing more. I did not need to. My father began watching too, not because I told him to, because my father is the same kind of person I am. He observes, he gathers, he waits. Over the following months, he told me things he had noticed about how Julian positioned himself in conversations about the business. They were small things, but they pointed. We never discussed it directly for a long time. There is a particular form of communication in my family that does not require all words to be said. We understood each other. He was protecting me the way he had always protected me, by paying attention and saying nothing before he was ready. The third year was the year Julian increased his effort. He had been patient, but patience has a limit even for patient people. He began suggesting things. He said he thought he might be useful in certain conversations my father was having. He said his background might be relevant. He was careful about how he said it. He was always careful. I listened to these suggestions with the same pleasant expression I had been perfecting for 3 years. I said things like, "That is interesting," or "I will mention it to my father." I never mentioned it to my father. My father already knew. We had our own conversations. By the 4th year, I was ready in all the practical ways. The protections were in place. The documentation was complete. My lawyer had reviewed everything 3 times. She said, "You are in a very strong position." I said, "I know." She looked at me with a slight expression of surprise. She said, "How long have you known?" I said, "From the beginning, almost." She said nothing for a moment. Then she said, "That is remarkable." I did not feel remarkable. I felt like someone who had done what needed to be done. I had spent 4 years paying attention and making preparations. That is not remarkable. That is just work. My grandmother used to say that preparation is the only form of luck that is actually in your control. She was right. The 5th year, I began to feel something unexpected. Impatience. Not with Julian, with myself. I was ready. Everything was ready. I had been watching a man perform a marriage for 5 years, and I was tired of watching. I wanted to be done. I wanted to be free. I moved the timeline. I had been planning for October. I moved it to September. My lawyer said she was ready whenever I was. My father said he was ready whenever I was. Marta said, finally. She had known since the 3rd year when I had finally told her. She had kept the secret perfectly. Julian noticed something in the weeks before, not the specifics. He could not have known the specifics, but he noticed a shift in me. He asked once if I was all right. I said I was fine. He looked at me for a moment with something that was almost real concern. I thought, this is the most genuine expression you have shown in 5 years, and it is happening because you sense something is ending. The Tuesday dinner, the wine he poured, his ease, his comfort. I had made his favorite meal, not for his benefit, for mine. I wanted to sit across from him at that table, feeling completely in control of everything that was about to happen. I wanted the meal to be good. It was. When I said, I need to tell you something, his expression was interested, relaxed. He did not know what was coming. He could not have imagined what was coming. That was the most honest indication of how little he had ever truly seen me. If he had really seen me, he would have known. I told him calmly. I told him everything I had found and everything I had done. I told him about the notebook and the lawyer and the preparations. I told him that every protection was already in place and that the process would begin in the morning. I told him he could challenge it if he wished. I told him he would not win. His face moved through several expressions quickly. I watched each one, shock, then recalculation, then the beginning of the charm approach, then the appeal. I waited through each one. When he had exhausted them all, I said, I have thought about this for 5 years. There is nothing you can say that I have not already considered. He left. The process completed. It was efficient, not painless. Efficient. There is a difference. Painless means nothing was felt. Efficient means it was done with care and precision and without more suffering than was necessary. I chose efficient, and I stand by that choice. The notebook sits in a box in my office now. I do not look at it. I do not need to, but I will not throw it away either. It is evidence of what I was capable of when it mattered. I find that worth keeping, not to revisit, just to know it exists. My father and I had lunch 3 days after the process was complete. He ordered wine. He said, I am proud of how you handled this. I said, I learned from watching you. He said, what did you learn from watching me? I said, that information is power only if you protect it until the right moment. He was quiet for a moment. Then he raised his glass. He said, to your grandmother. Who taught us both that? I said, to grandmother. We drank. The restaurant was warm. Outside the city was going about its business, and I was free in a way that felt permanent, earned, mine. Freedom is strange when you have spent 5 years not having it. Not the obvious kind of unfreedom. Nothing that would have been visible to anyone watching from the outside. The inside kind. The kind where you are always oriented around something that is not you. I did not realize how much of my daily thinking had been structured around Julian until he was gone, and suddenly it was not. The first week after was disorienting in a specific way. Too much space in my head, too few calculations that needed to be run. I did not know what to do with the quiet. I called Marta. She came over. She said, "What do you need?" I said, "I do not know." She said, "That is the right answer." She made tea and sat with me in the quiet and did not try to fill it. She had been doing that for me since we were 12 years old. She is one of the best people I know. I called my father too. He was at his desk. He always is in the mornings. He answered on the second ring. I said, "It is done." He said, "Good." He said, "How are you?" I said, "Strange." He said, "That is temporary." I said, "I know." He said, "Come for dinner on Friday." I said, "Yes." Friday dinner with my father is a thing we do every few weeks. It has been that way since I was old enough to have real conversations with him. We talk about everything. We argue sometimes. He has opinions and I have opinions, and we find the places where they differ and examine them carefully. He never once during those 5 years said, "Leave him." I think he knew that was not useful. He kept watch. He stayed close. He showed me through his presence that he was paying attention and that I was not alone. That is a particular kind of fathering. I was very lucky to have it. After the dinner, the week after the separation, he poured more wine and said, "I want to ask you something." I said, "Ask." He said, "Are you all right?" Not, "Is the process going well?" Not, "Is everything in order? Are you all right?" The personal question. I appreciated it. I told him the truth. I said, "I am relieved." I said, "I am a little sad, but not in the way you might expect." I said, "I am sad that I wasted time." I said, "I think if I had been braver earlier, I could have ended it sooner and had those years back." He said, "You were not wasting time. You were preparing. Those are different things." He was right. I know he was right. The preparations were necessary. The documentation was necessary. The care with which I moved was what made the ending clean and complete and unchallengeable. A braver, earlier exit might have been messier and more costly. I made the right choice. I know that. But I am also allowed to grieve the years. Both things are true. The preparations were right, and the years still cost me something. I grieve them quietly, not loudly, not in a way that interferes with moving forward. But I let myself acknowledge it, because acknowledging the cost is the honest thing to do. The blue notebook is in a box. The box is on the top shelf of my office closet. I have thought about destroying it, burning it, or shredding it. Then I thought, no, let it stay. Not because I will look at it again, but because it is proof of something. It is proof that I was capable of exactly the thing that was needed when the thing was needed. That capability did not come from nowhere. I was not born knowing how to keep records and wait. I learned it by watching my father, by watching my grandmother before that, by being raised in a family that understood that the moment of action is only possible because of everything that was done before the moment. I think about passing that on. I do not have children yet. I may, I might not. But I think about what I would give to a child if I did. I would give them exactly what my family gave me. The understanding that preparation is not fear, that patience is not passivity, that knowing something and waiting for the right moment to say it is wisdom. Julian taught me something else too. He taught me what I actually wanted, not by giving it to me, by being so specifically not that thing that the absence became a definition. I know now what I want in a partner. I want someone who is interested in me as a person, who remembers what I say, who shows up consistently without requiring management. I have been seeing someone. His name is Theo. He is an engineer. He works with complicated systems, and he thinks about problems carefully before speaking about them. He asks about my work and remembers my answers. He says what he thinks even when it is inconvenient. He is not strategic. That last thing is the most important. He is not strategic. Julian was entirely strategic. Every warmth was placed. Every gesture was calculated for effect. Theo's warmth is just his warmth. It has no other purpose. I find this so refreshing that sometimes I have to remind myself it is normal, that this is what most people are like, that I was simply with the wrong person for a long time. My friend Petra asked me what Julian would think if he knew how things had turned out. I thought about it. I said, I think he would be surprised that I am this well. He thought he understood the situation. He did not understand the situation at all. She laughed. I laughed too. That is the truth of it. He did not understand me. That is the simplest version of the whole thing. He saw a position, a family name, an access point. He did not see the person who kept a blue notebook and read it every week and waited 5 years for the right moment. He did not see her at all. She was sitting across from him every day, and he never looked. I am glad he did not. If he had seen her, he might have tried to manage her differently. He might have been cleverer. He was not clever enough for the person he was actually dealing with, and that was entirely to my benefit. I will take every advantage I was given. Now I am here, on the other side of all of it. In the life I am building, one careful, honest day at a time, with Theo and my father, and Marta, and the blue notebook on the top shelf that I do not need to open anymore, with everything I know about myself that I did not know before. That is where I am. It is a very good place to be. Theo asked me once what I was like before Julian. I said, similar. I said, same person, less certain about some things. He said, what things? I thought about it. I said, what I would not accept. He said, and now you know. I said, now I know exactly. Knowing exactly what you will not accept sounds limiting. It is actually the opposite. When you know clearly what you will not accept, you can stop watching for it. You can stop the low background monitoring. You can be present. That is the gift of having been through something difficult. Not that you are protected from everything, that you know yourself well enough to move through the world more freely. I move through the world more freely now. That is the summary. Everything else is detail. The notebook and the 5 years, and the Tuesday dinner, and the wine and his expression when I told him I had known from the beginning. All of it detail. The summary is, I move through the world more freely. I am more myself. I know what I will not accept, and I know what I want, and I live accordingly. That is everything. That is the whole of it. My grandmother would recognize me. She would sit across from me at a table and see someone she understood, someone who did what needed doing and then got on with living. She would pour more tea and ask me about my work and listen to the answer, and that would be that. No drama, no excessive analysis, just the ordinary work of continuing. I learned from the best. I am grateful every day. The blue notebook is still there, on the top shelf. I know exactly where it is. That knowledge is a kind of quiet confidence. I did what needed doing. I kept the record. I was ready when it mattered. If I needed to be that person again, I could be. I know that now. I am glad to know it. I hope I never need to use it again, but I am glad to know it is there. That is what 5 years of paying attention gave me. Not bitterness, knowledge, capability, the understanding that I am equal to what I am faced with. That is a very good thing to know about yourself. Theo and I had dinner with my father last week. The 3 of us at my father is table. Good wine. My father is best stories. Theo asking the right questions and listening fully to the answers. My father leaning back in his chair at the end of the evening with the expression he gets when he is satisfied. Walking home, Theo said, "Your father is extraordinary." I said, "I know." I said, "I learned most of what matters from watching him." Theo said, "What is the most important thing you learned?" I thought about it. I said, that preparation is respect. That when you prepare for something properly, you are telling it that it is worth your full attention. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "That is very true." He said, "I think you are the most prepared person I have ever met." I said, "I used to think that was a strange quality to be proud of." He said, "Why?" I said, "Because it sounds defensive, like you are always ready for the worst." He said, "Or you could see it as being ready for anything." He said, "Ready for the things that go wrong and ready to fully meet the things that go right." He looked at me. He said, "You were ready for me." I said, "I was." He smiled. I smiled. We walked the rest of the way home in the good quiet of two people who have found each other and know it. That is where I am now, ready for what comes next and fully here in what is present. The notebook on the shelf, my father across a dinner table, Theo walking beside me, the ordinary good weight of a life that belongs to me completely. I built this, every careful, patient, prepared day of it. I would do it all the same way again. I know what I am worth, and I know what I will not accept, and I know what I want. I am here. I am free. I am glad.